taka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mākina kina ki tai, kia mātaratara ki uta. He hia ke ana te ātā kura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu. Si hei mauri ora. Kia koutou ngā mana, ngā tapu, ngā ihi, ngā whakamataku. Nau mai, haere mai, ki tēnei hui ahurei, ki hono rua mano, rua tekau mā toru. Nau mai ki tēnei hui rangahau, kia koutou te aumangea, koutou ngā kaiwhakaawe-awe, koutou ngā tohunga o te ao auaha, o te ao rangahau. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou nau mai, me ngā tapu, ngā mana, ngā mate huhua kei runga i a koutou, nau mai i tēnei ata. Ka tika ki te mihi ki ngā aitua, e hinga nei huhua, puta noa i te ao, e haranoa ki Aotearoa. Ara era e hinga mai rā i Ukraine, era e mate mai rā i ngā whenua o Palestine. Ko te whāinga me tuku atu rātau kia haere ki tua o te ārai, engari ko te aroha, ko te whāinga, e hara ko te kōhuru tamariki mokopuna wāhine, engari ko te whaike i te āio ki wānanui i a tātou te tangata. Kia mutu tēnei mahi te pakanga, te mutu tēnei mahi te pati i a tātou te tangata, engari ko te whaike i te mate aone i wānganui i a tātou. Nō reira, o tātou te hunga ora e whai nei i te hōhonu o te wānanga i tēnei ata, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, ngā kaituku i ngā kauhau i tēnei ata, kei te mihi ki a koutou katoa. Kei te mihi hoki ki a Sergio i te paparahi o Amerika ki te tonga. O tira kei te mihi atu ki a koe Marcos e whakahaere nei i tā tātou wānanga i tēnei ata. Nō reira, koutou puta noi i te ao e mātakitaki mai nei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ka huri.
So welcome everyone for the second day of LINK, the 5th edition of our international conference in Practice Lead Research and Global South Perspectives. We are very pleased to have all the speakers that we have today with a high caliber projects and very interesting things that we'll share in the presentations today. It's always really nervous in the beginning and then the things warm up. So let me introduce this first presentation, which is we call the Waikato group, because we have 5 members connected to Waikato University. So let me just read briefly who we have here. So we have Karen Barbour. Sorry, Karen, if it's not exactly the right Karen Barbour. Karen Barbour is Associate Professor and Head of Te Kuratoi School of Arts of the University of Waikato. Creativity and embodiment frame her academic research in dance, visual digital dance, and creative practice in arts. She has a particular interest in sight dance, relationships to place, and environmental change. We have Declan Patrick. Declan is an academic and theater practitioner working across performance, dance, and video. His research takes the form of traditional academic publications and performance. As a theater practitioner, Declan Patrick has worked as an actor, singer, dancer, playwright, director, choreographer, and producer. He has worked as an artistic director of a number of companies, and his performance company, Fighting Fit Productions, has made work and toured in New Zealand, the Philippines, China, the UK, and Spain. He's currently a senior lecturer in theater studies at the University of Waikato. Alberto Alvarez-Jimenez. Dr. Alberto Alvarez-Jimenez is a Colombian and Canadian citizen based in Aotearoa, New Zealand. He holds a PhD degree from the University of Ottawa, a Master of Laws from McGill University, and law degree from the University of La Sabana. Currently, he is a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of Waikato, and his area of research and expertise is international law. Xavier Meade. Xavier is a visual artist born in Mexico, living more than half of his life in Aotearoa, New Zealand. He's practicing in the fields of painting, photography, graphic design, calligraphy, eco-design, and architecture. Retired tutor and research at Wintech in Kirikiriroa, sorry. His collaborative posters, projects, paintings, and photography have been exhibited in Aotearoa, Mexico, Cuba, Spain, Scotland, the US, and Croatia. And last but not the least, our Gaúcho friend here, Rodrigo, is a creative and he's a Brazilian photographer, and his creative interests are rooted in the intersection of lens-based and documentary approach, in which photography plays the role of representing layered place imaginaries. Rodrigo holds a PhD from the University of Waikato and is a lecturer at the University of Waikato as well at the School of Art, Screen and Media. Rodrigo's research explored the multiple possibilities that surround photography practices and how photography is used as a way to perceive and make place. So welcome, Karen, welcome, Declan, welcome, Alberto, welcome, Javier, welcome, Rodrigo. We are very pleased to have you here. The stage is all yours.
Thank you, Marcos, for such a warm welcome. Obrigado, Marcos, pelo acolhimento. Eu queria mandar um alô para todos os colegas do Brasil e da América Latina que estão aí conosco, colegas do Chile, Argentina e todos os países da América Latina e a mundo afora. Muito obrigado por estarem aqui conosco. Thank you all for being with us here today. It's a great joy, actually, to be presenting here. We're very grateful for the invitation, Marcos, Mato, Robert, and Sergio in Brazil, and we're very thankful to be here. I think we can probably get started now. We have all 5 of us on the screen. Just before we actually officially start, I want to just tell a little story to get us in the zone. The Brazilian audience will recognize this. So once the great Brazilian composer Antônio Carlos Jobim, or Tom Jobim, or Tonzinho, he once said that it was much more enjoyable to be alongside his friends and partners or parceiros and parceiras when he was playing a musical concert or a gig. So he had Vinícius de Moraes with him. He had Miúcha with him. He had Toquinho with him. And on the same musical note, perhaps, it's great to be here with my friends, colleagues, and partners, or parceiros and parceiras, presenting this project. It's much more enjoyable to have the support of a big band when you're doing such an important concert. So thank you all, and I think we can get started now. So this presentation project is the result of it's a transdisciplinary collaboration between researchers in Te Kuratoi, or the School of Arts, and Te Piringa Faculty of Law from the University of Waikato, Te Whare Wānanga o Waikato. And we had support from international collaborators as well. And just as a quick sort of summary, the presentation will cover the curatorial possibilities and multimedia installation strategies that were employed to articulate how embodied research in the arts and social sciences informs the interpretation of international humanitarian law. So that's just a quick summary. We will speak in the following order. So Alberto is going to start. The presentation will be followed by Karen, then Declan, Javier, and myself. And at the end, hopefully we'll have enough time to play the video of one of the performers, the performance. So I'm going to start passing the mic here to my friend and colleague, the one and only Alberto Jimenez. Por favor, señor. Thank you all very much. Alberto, you take the lead.
Thank you so much, Marcos, and all the organizers of this wonderful event. Hola a todos en Latin America, en Brazil, Chile, and so it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much also to Rodrigo for this wonderful introduction with this story of this very important Brazilian musician. So I think could we share the screen, our presentation, Rodrigo? Okay, so this is the title of our presentation, our project, Solastalgia, Conflict, and the Fabric of Life. And so basically the point we wanted to address with this project was how to use research in arts to inform the interpretation of international humanitarian law. So after a few months, Karen came with the idea of solastalgia. And as she will explain in a few minutes, solastalgia is a long-term feeling when you lose your places of significance, when your home environment changes as a result of climate change. So we took this concept of the loss of home, the loss of environment, and its drastic change to the fabric of life, and found that the same situation happens as a result of armed conflict. So what we then did was trying to incorporate this concept within the law, within international humanitarian law, and we found that one of the places was the principle of proportionality. And I will have a very, very brief introduction to the principle of proportionality. So don't be afraid, this won't be a law presentation. So basically, the principle of proportionality has the following formulation. You have the legal text, but I will explain it briefly to you. So basically, military commanders, where they are planning military operations, can obviously attack military targets, and can also cause civilian casualties and loss of civilian property, loss or damage to civilian property. But this civilian harm has to be proportionate to the military advantage. So military commanders need to make the calculation. They have to measure the military advantage, kind of anticipate the expected civilian harm, and see if both are proportionate, if the civilian harm is proportionate. If it's not proportionate, so they have to suspend the operation, or they have to design a different operation that will minimize the civilian harm to the degree in which they can assume it is proportionate. So our point was, with the use of solastalgia, was how to incorporate solastalgia within the principle of proportionality. So in a way that military commanders must evaluate this long-term impact of the military operation on the civilian fabric of life. And the result of this, as a matter of practice, is that military commanders will have a higher threshold of the principle of proportionality to meet, and as a result, they will have to take measures aimed at reducing this long-term effect on the fabric of life of civilians when they are planning their military operations. So that's the definition. This is the concept that we are using in this project, and we all are making elaborations about the use of solastalgia within the principle of proportionality in international humanitarian law. That's all the legal concepts for today. So I give the floor to Karen and my great friends. And last but not least, I just agree with Rodrigo. It is always great to be surrounded by friends. So thank you so much.
Gracias,
Karen,
Alberto. Gracias. Kia ora koutou. Boa tarde, hola, greetings. Hi, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to share our work with you. My name's Karen, and I appreciate the introduction, Marcos, and it's great to be here with colleagues and friends. So I'm going to pick up the story here and how we moved from the complexity of international humanitarian law to solastalgia. Alberto and I began this research in 2021 with dialogue, with discussion, and this has been ongoing. To date, it's resulted in a legal article in New Zealand Law Journal and another longer one that's currently under review. I want to share more background, though, about the creative practice research, because this is where we all connect, I think, and how the team expanded to a larger group of artists. And our colleagues will continue and talk about workshop methods, site research, and subsequent gallery exhibition. In the very initial discussions between Alberto and I, we spent substantial time working together to understand key assumptions and concepts and processes from our really different fields of law and dance. I found this principle of proportionality in international humanitarian law quite complex and also quite morally distressing. The whole discussion I found quite distressing, even though I accept the necessity for laws around the decisions made in armed conflict. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I think it's reasonable, Alberto, that as a law researcher, some of the dance and embodied understandings that were familiar to me, particularly around things like kinesthetic awareness, took some demystifying. So we literally brought in-depth questions to each other and wrote a lot of journal notes from our discussions. And so there's a little example on the screen from my journal. As a dance artist and creative practice researcher, broadly speaking, it's clear to me that all research involves embodiment, requiring our bodies in every aspect, if you like, from design to gathering material, to analysing and then to presenting findings. However, embodied research methods specifically gather complex and nuanced understandings of our lived experiences. Embodied research methods require attention to experiences, so attention to sensory input, to proprioception, to kinesthetic awareness, to the thoughts and emotions of our lived experiences. And as dancers, we specialise in embodied methods. So as we talked together, our aim became to explore and investigate international humanitarian law through embodied methods, and to consider how embodied methods might inform our understanding of civilian experiences during armed conflict. We focused on these principles, proportionality and also distinction, particularly with the aim, as Alberto already said, the aim to expand the protection of civilians during armed conflict. I'd like to clarify, though, that our aim was not to write about actual experiences of armed conflict or to represent the testimonies of people who had experienced it through dance. That wasn't what we were doing. Instead, we aim to use embodied methods to seek out ways of understanding legal concepts differently. One way of understanding what we're doing is as transdisciplinary research, as our work involves more than just interdisciplinary methods. Transdisciplinary research moves beyond the bridging of divides in academia to engaging directly with the production and use of knowledge. So I'd like to shift and talk a little bit about methodological flow here, and how we got to create a practice research, which I can imagine is a question in your minds as you're listening. So for me as a dance artist, the project initially involved creative practice methodology through embodied workshops. That's where we started. And we planned for it to be undertaken over 4 months with a diverse group of experienced dance researchers, a visual artist, Xavier, photographer and videographer, Rodrigo, and this practice of discussion and journal note writing. As a consequence of the 2021 pandemic lockdown, which affected us particularly in Waikato and Auckland in New Zealand, some of the workshops became Zoom workshops, and you can see the group of 12 of us here working on Zoom. So the research process involved multiple methods, layers, and iterations of practice through which our understandings accumulated over time. I'd like to talk about the concept of solastalgia, which Alberto introduced, and just give a little bit more detail here. So it's a concept that encapsulates a form of environmental distress, and it arose quite early in the discussions between us. Initially, the concept was developed from research with people who experienced destruction of their homes and local places significant to them. The concept was proposed by Australian researcher Glenn Albrecht in 2005, relating to the pollution of local environments. It's now being used in relation to climate change, and the concept is part of the environmental distress scale as a measurable form of psychological distress that impacts our well-being. As a definition, solastalgia refers to the pain or distress caused by the loss of or the inability to derive solace connected to the negatively perceived state of one's home environment. Solastalgia exists when there is the lived experience of the physical desolation of our home. And what we've done in this work is to think about how solastalgia might help us understand the environmental destruction of homes caused by war, invasion, and conflict. More normally, it's loss of civilian life and damage or destruction of civilian property that are considered the main forms of harm in the context of armed conflict. So solastalgia is a part of harm that civilians may experience. Our attempt was to understand the conceptually different form of harm that solastalgia creates. And we hope to use this to advocate, and for us, I think this is the important point, to advocate for greater protection of civilians through international humanitarian law. So the concept of solastalgia really became the pivot point for us in this research. So I'm now going to pass the story of this research along to Declan for the next layer.
Kia ora. My name is Declan Patrick. I'm one of the artists that Karen and Alberto brought in at the workshop stage. So I've had a career as a performer in theatre and dance, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about my involvement and what we actually did. So for this particular set of research activities, I drew on my background as a dancer and academic, specifically working with the idea of embodiment. Using this idea, I and the other creative academics explored possibilities of incorporating and realizing concepts through our bodies. My involvement in this project started as a dancer in 2022. Karen and Alberto had worked to the point of involving academic artists, and as one of a group of creatives, in person and on Zoom, we worked individually and in groups to physically and artistically explore these concepts. What we didn't do was pretend to be civilians in war. We made a conscious decision not to pretend, act, or to imitate, instead engaging in using different methodologies. We went through a cyclical process. We did this by reading and listening to words in the legal texts, to the meaning, shape, texture, and sounds of them. We took them into our bodies and transformed them into improvised, abstract movement. We took turns reading texts, giving these texts creative treatments, playing with structure, breath, and timing. Interspersed with these treatments of the materials, we held group discussions, which gave us a chance to articulate some of the questions that arose through the physical explorations, but also a chance to express some of the academic emotional responses to the material, to discuss associations, and plan for our next series of explorations. This allowed nuance to emerge from our physical response, but also for each discussion to influence the subsequent iteration of the physical investigation. Xavier and Rodrigo documented the process and the subtle interconnections between body, text, and concept. This documentation soon became something much, much more, becoming a stage of investigation in itself. My next involvement with the project came in 2023, when Rodrigo invited Karen and me to engage with the site at Ruapuki using the same concepts. Due to scheduling difficulties, Karen and I worked on separate days. After some discussion, we went to the site, and over several hours I worked with two very different ideas as a performer. I explored the site using techniques from site-specific dance practices, and this involved working with structures, textures, smells, and images that the site provided. I crawled on the roof, climbed the nail-studded walls. I swung from the studs. I explored the site imaginatively, constructing the house in my mind, working with the memory of what might have been. The other idea I worked with was physically recalling the studio work, specifically Solastalgia. The idea had worked into my body and psyche, allowing a type of kinesthetic memory to engage with this new site, a new iteration of previous work. The video from this practical research was edited and displayed in the gallery exhibition at the Ramp Gallery in August 2023, where the next iteration of the research took place. Here you see Karen, Helene, and I performing for the opening of the exhibition. We created a performance that interacted with the videos of the exploratory workshop, the Ruapuki site-based exploration, and edited video text. This, in effect, created a human living connection between these stages and iterations of the research. And at this point, I'd like to pass over to Xavier. So thank you for your attention.
Kia ora everyone. Bienvenidos todos. Un placer estar aquí con ustedes. And yeah, my job here, if we could call it my job, my collaboration had to do with painting and with responding to the text and to the concepts that are being presented through drawing and painting, which started with some Zoom meetings, as it was mentioned before, and I was always pen or any drawing instrument in hand, sketching whatever was being said, not literally, but trying to interpret these concepts of solastalgia and proportionality. I used to paint with music, live performances with music, and I was painting, but this time was kind of different because I was responding first to text and then to text of legal terms, and sometimes to respond to the body movements that the dancers were expressing. Some of the sessions happen at the dance studio at the Waikato University, and it was quite a challenge and quite an interesting and profound kind of experience. Can you put the next image? Thank you. Yeah. So I did some drawings of this type. It was something like I don't know. I ended up producing about 60 of them during the whole process. We have several sessions of the dance and the readings. And I kind of produce several drawings, and then we did a final thing at the Ramp Gallery, which we're going to talk about that later. But I just want to stress the response, the visual response to that, which is always difficult to do, especially in the times of today, in which the conflicts that are happening in the world are so are profound. So this was some of my responses, and we're going to see some other ones later on. And I think it's time for Rodrigo to talk to us about it. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Javier. Again, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to, oh yeah, there it is. So I came on board into the project during the studio workshop stage. Karen and Alberto invited me to come to photograph the workshops and the dances. And as Declan just introduced, we were there to initially document, but I think Javier and we actually went beyond that point of documentation. And as an artist, immediately on the first few hours being there with the dancers and photographing it, I immediately realized, wow, there's something much bigger than this, and the concepts were so intriguing in a way and offered a lot of creative possibilities. So that I had my creative mind here, like working immediately as soon as I walked in. And what I was trying to do as a photographer there was trying to move with the dancers and try to somehow kind of represent what they were kind of sort of feeling or embodying in those workshops, and intersecting that with the concept of solastalgia. So I think that's where it gets really interesting creatively, because we have really kind of profound and deep concepts to work with underpinning the creative process. So that kind of intersection during the workshop stage was really inspiring for me, at least, and I think Javier will probably share that with the paintings that he did. So as I was saying, like we all realized, well, there's so much more potential to this, and we kind of decided, okay, let's do an exhibition, an art exhibition out of this project. So the next stage was to then think about how can we expand the workshop format into something else or something different, in this case, using photography and video. So the idea of the site base came, and I as Declan said, we scattered a location here off the west coast of the Raglan here, where I live in Whaingaroa and Ruapuki. So, and we found this abandoned home there, and we could go and photograph and video and do the performances there. So there were two visits to this site, one with Declan and one with Karen. So those were important because they added new layers to the project and also helped kind of sort of help strengthening the aesthetic and the conceptual parameters and components of the project that would later be formatted into the gallery exhibition. So this photographs are from the workshop stages. So as I said, I was trying to move along with the dancers and working with body gesture, light, and trying to move away from the conventional dance photography sort of strategies of just sit there still and just photograph what happens in front of you. Instead, I was actually moving with the dancers around and shooting against the light, something generally we don't do, but and playing with those sort of visual motifs and developing them as I went along. And those motifs were then expanded into the next stage, which was the site-based. So again, playing with light and setting up an atmospheric kind of, stage, so to speak, to Declan and Karen, so they could then do their own thing, their performance as embodied researchers. So it was a bit like we just walked into the site and set up the lights, and I had a video camera rolling, and I was taking stills as well. And Declan and Karen they were just doing their thing. So that's kind of how it unfolded this stage. And I'm just sharing a few of the photographs that were produced during the site-based stage. So once this was completed, then we started thinking about the gallery, how we can now format all this components into an art exhibition. So I took the challenge and the role of curating the exhibition. And I have to say that the whole project now, up to that stage and compiled in so many layers, it became a bit of a curatorial enigma to crack. And that enigma had many different iterative stages and multiple methods, layers, and iterations of practices that covered painting, lens-based photography, video performance, text, sonic or audio art, art installation, and so on. So the challenge there was to put them together. So at Ramp Gallery in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton, that's the Wintec Gallery. I copied the map of the gallery here because I think a good curatorial kind of approach or thinking starts with the floor mat, looking at the space and see how we can format the work into the space. So we had Gallery 2 room and Gallery 1 here, and then a frontage window. So on Gallery 2 here, that was the entry of the gallery. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you how we installed some of the photographs and the paintings here. And then Gallery 1, which is the main room, that's where we had the video projections. And we called this the kind of more atmospheric room, or there was another word. There was some sort of atmospheric room here that we created. And this Gallery 2 was the entry room. And then we had the frontage window with Javier's paintings on it. And this on the right is the front cover of a catalog. So we've put out a catalog in collaboration with the Ramp Gallery designers for the exhibition. So this is two views from the entry room with the photographs and the paintings installed in intentionally scattered kind of placements on the wall. And for this piece of work, I was playing with the scale of the photographic prints and the paintings, the motifs and colors, and creating interconnections between the images and playing with the size of the prints, placement of the prints and the photographs and the paintings. So trying to create this shape with this installation. And we also had some of the law texts and principles printed here for the audience to read, and a print of a photograph of the Zoom meetings to give the other sense of like we had this kind of stage as well. So then moving to the bigger room, that's where we had the projections. We also had a light box with a diptych of two photographs here of the abandoned house. And the projections were cornered there to resemble the same shape of the photographs and the paintings, the way they were installed, and also to mirror both of the stages here in the studio video and the site based video. So that's how it was sort of arranged. And it was, again, a little bit of a projection enigma here, because we had to work with the WinTech technicians, and I'm so grateful that they were great, and they are actually great technicians. And this rig that was constructed, they actually had to handmade this rig and get those projections installed in a way that we could get those keystone them into the right position on the wall. So this was quite a challenge as well. And lastly, we had here on the right the law text. So this is something we've discussed a lot. How can we incorporate the law principles into the work? And the projection, it just felt like a useful way to bring up the law concepts through words and keywords that were sort of popping in and out on that projection. So this was the main room. So this is a photograph of one of the performance here. Sorry, we had on the opening day. So on the opening day of the exhibition, Karen, Declan, and Helene did a performance, now interacting with the video of the site base, the studio, and the text that was projected onto the wall. I'm going to pass back to Javier, and he's going to talk about his approach to paint the front window of the gallery.
Kia ora again. Yes, I'm very familiar with the WinTech Gallery, with Dramp Gallery, because I worked there for many years, and I exhibit there in solo and group shows. Yeah? And I always have and I love that window front, And as Rodrigo explained before, this gallery has got three different, quite different spaces that invite you to want to do the immersive one where the projections were done, and the other one which normally paintings and all the graphic stuff kind of works really well. And then they had this wall, this frontage wall that you can see from the street as you walk by or as you drive, So in here, what I tried to do in what it actually took me a couple of days to paint on the spot. So this was painted directly into the gallery, into the walls of the gallery, and really the technicians did a really good job and helping, and then cleaning afterwards. So it was kind of like an ephemeral thing, as much as the dance was ephemeral. It just happened in one day. And this, what I try to do in here is, after all the concepts of proportionality and solastalgia, I try to visually display in these images, what happens, how is that concept represented. So I have in some calligraphy kind of people in there, in several clusters. And one of them was when the when the commandant, as Alberto said, decided to blow, to do the attack, So it's some, I don't know, I see them as victims in there, So that's kind of what's my take of the solastalgia and principal and proportionality concepts in a visual way. Kia ora.
Gracias. Gracias, compañero. We're going to finish now the presentation showing a video of the live performance that was on the day. So I'm just going to load the video and we'll run, I think we have 4 or so minutes left. So I'm just going to run the video for the remaining time and then we'll just come back and close very briefly. So just be with me, please. I don't know, it's not, so let's see. It's every time I click Thiago, it goes to the next slide instead of playing the video.
Maybe you should stop sharing, Rodrigo, and then share
Load.
again.
Yeah, okay. Give me a second, please. Okay, I'm just going to try to load it again. Video and Zoom, it doesn't go well together. Okay, it looks like it's going to work. I'm going to share my screen.
Solastalgia. In war-torn countries and cities that have experienced conflict, the destruction of environments creates substantial personal trauma and major economic impact. Amongst the psychological and social impacts, shared experiences of families and communities include the loss of homes, the loss of environments and home environments. Solastalgia encompasses psychological distress, grief, and sensations of loss of those who are experiencing major change in their current home environment through climate change and or destructive human action, the loss of homes and home environments, or distress caused by the loss of or inability to derive solace, connected to the negatively perceived state of one's home environment. Solastalgia exists when there is the lived experience of the physical desolation of home. Or inability to derive solace. Solastalgia is a place-based lived experience or inability to derive solace. Environment, home, distress and loss. Environment, home, distress and loss of solastalgia illustrate that the words environment, home, distress and loss
Okay, Hod.
Understanding solastalgia is the focus on places and lived experience. Solastalgia relates to women, families, and home, to food security and soil and contamination issues. How, for instance, does one's positionality within society, one's access to resources, and one's decision-making power determine the likelihood or intensity of solastalgia? Historical trauma, losses and disruption. Historical trauma has been understood as the cumulative and intergenerational experiences of multiple chronic traumas experienced by Indigenous peoples and others, including but certainly not limited to land disposition and degradation or inability to derive solace can be.
So this should give you all, like, it's just a sample. I think our time is up now. Marcos is going like this to me now. So I think I should stop. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. So thank you for this opportunity. I think we're going to open to questions now, but I hope the video just gave you a quick taste of what the what the exhibition was and the performance on the day. So we
Thank
can
you,
open.
everyone, and sorry for the time. It's just like we need to follow the schedule a little bit. And that's why I asked you, Rodrigo. It's not me, it's the time, mate. Thanks a lot. Just because I have one question here that I think there's more than one question, but there's one question here that I thought you guys decide if you're Karen or Alberto, who wants to answer. But the question is, kia ora, team, thank you for your fabulous presentation. I found really interesting how you guys are interlinking theory and practice and creating disciplinarity. I thought that was really cool. And if we don't have these opportunities to exchange these things, there would be just not just but journals in articles that never will see the grandiosity of the collaboration. And I think that's the core of this question is how was to work with researchers with such different cultural and professional backgrounds? What were the protocols, values, visions, strategy to create synergy, working process, to decide and discuss thematics, methodological approach? I think that was something that everybody is curious and wants to learn from you guys. So if you could take your time and discuss a little bit about that, I think it will be very useful. Whoever wants to start talking, or you just combine whatever works for you guys.
Shall I start and then
Please.
everyone can jump in? I think that the whole conversation was the most crucial element, the dialogue between us. And that started, as I described, between Alberto and I. And I think we had such a challenging task to find ways of, first of all, understanding each other's sort of core assumptions. And we had both the disciplinary differences, our cultural, gender differences, and language differences too. And so we had a lot to work with, and that was really where it began. And I guess we took that process into working with the whole team. So we had a colleague who was in Argentina, Chilean colleagues, Korean colleagues, Iranian colleague, and we had a lot of discussion about how we understood different terms, how we articulated and experienced things differently, and what our different positionalities revealed. So I'm going to stop now, and then someone will take up with their thought.
if I might say so, I think something that had a lot to do with it is friendship, because we knew I knew some of you. I didn't know all of the participants, but I think that that has been always part of my research. Is been, if I'm collaborating, friendship is number one. So, kia ora for that.
Well, I think that I would add that one of the great advantages was that we were all out of our depths. So
Yes.
we had to trust each other all the time. And in addition, we all understood that we had to leave our egos at the door. And so there was no point. It was really everybody doing their best to contribute to the project, and until this day we haven't had any difference. When we are always open to views, we are always open to being challenged in a friendly way, in an intellectual way. So I think this has also been an important point of this project. Kia ora.
There was another question for Declan here from Emily.
Yeah, I was reading that. I was just waiting to see if anybody else would like to contribute on the answer. The other question, Declan, is somebody wrote, Emily, and you need teabag. I'm curious to know if this was the first time that you have done a dance project partially based on legal texts, and if yes, how did you personally feel with that?
Okay, well, thanks for the question. And yes, it was the first time I've worked with legal texts. Not the first time I've worked with texts, but with legal text, yes. And frankly, it was extremely challenging. Something that Karen was talking about earlier was this sort of emotional response that she was having. And it was very similar for me as well, that while understanding the need for these particular legal protections, there was a huge outrage in me that these protections were so weak for civilians. And this is part of the point I think we were all feeling, is this this way in which civilians need to be protected and need to be saved, I suppose, from the decisions of war makers. And so I found working with legal texts frustrating, because I felt they didn't go far enough, because I felt that a lot of the time intent was hidden with the words, and the words were being used in really specific sorts of ways that were really quite tricky and difficult to find responses to, that weren't knee-jerk emotional responses. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. Yes, it was really challenging, but very worthwhile as well. Thank you.
Could I just add something to what Declan just said? So regarding the text, this is the outcome of interstate negotiations. So it has to be ambiguous in a sense, on one hand, and on the other, this text reflects different positions that the states have. So when you are negotiating these kind of agreements, the Geneva Convention that mentions the principle of proportionality, you're dealing with on one side with a certain portion of the state negotiating, or all the states that has a strong military influence. But at the same time, within this very same state or each state, there is also a civilian component. So people who are there negotiating in order to protect civilians, and at the same time again negotiating to make sure that war how to conduct war operations in a way that is safe for the military that is taking part in the conflict. So you have this really complex ambiguity. So I certainly can relate to what Declan was saying. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Alberto. Thank you, Declan. Thank you, Javier. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Rodrigo. It was a pleasure to hear your research. I know we do this on most of our leisure time, weekends, and we do this for the love we have for the things we do. So congratulations. That's pretty beautiful. It's wonderful to see this group inspiring your students in Waikato through practice. Congratulations, you all.